Meet Melissa Hardwick, a woman appearing before a family court judge in Greenup County, Kentucky, for what was supposed to be a routine domestic violence hearing. But what unfolded inside the courtroom left everyone in complete shock. The hearing had barely begun. Her ex, John Anderson, was just starting his testimony when Melissa suddenly snapped.
My personal life is none of your business.
The judge immediately tried to regain control of the room.
Miss Hardwick,
No.
you will be held in contempt of this court if you become disruptive.
But Melissa wasn't finished. She kept talking over the court, refusing to back down.
I haven't done anything to this court. I haven't done anything to him.
That was the final straw.
She will be arrested for
It
contempt of
doesn't
court.
make any difference.
You will serve 10 days for contempt of court.
But just when everyone thought it was over, it escalated fast. Hardwick suddenly vaulted onto the judge's bench. In seconds, the courtroom erupted. The judge was now face to face with a furious woman, clearly unstable and charging toward her. It was a worst-case scenario for any courtroom. Luckily, Deputy Adam Dodson moved in swiftly, tackling Hardwick midair before she could make contact. She hit the floor, kicking and screaming, demanding to be released. Meanwhile, the judge remained remarkably calm, watching the chaos unfold from the bench. Hardwick screamed.
Wait and see.
You'll be saying what happened, Jennifer.
Even while pinned to the floor, Hardwick continued making threats, this time directed at the judge. What she may not have realized was that this outburst had crossed into felony territory. Threatening a judge isn't just a courtroom outburst, it's a serious criminal offense that can carry severe penalties. Once deputies removed Hardwick from the courtroom, the judge took a moment to collect herself. Visibly rattled, she adjusted her papers and tried to return to order. Still, she maintained her composure. "A different judge will need to take over the case," she announced.
A new judge will have to be appointed to represent because she will be charged criminally for the threats that were made in open court today.
She also confirmed she'd recuse herself to avoid any claims of bias. In the end, Melissa Hardwick was sentenced to 120 days in jail for contempt of court. And in many ways, she got off easy. Had she physically touched the judge, she could have been looking at years in prison. Instead, she faced additional charges of terroristic threatening, intimidation of a judicial officer, and resisting arrest. Rather than more jail time, Hardwick received 5 years of probation, along with mandatory mental health treatment and anger management classes. As for John Anderson, he got what he came for. The court upheld the emergency protective order, enforcing strict no-contact rules. And while Anderson barely had the chance to speak, his ex-wife's actions spoke volumes. This is Sydney Newsome, a 27-year-old defendant standing trial in Pike County, Mississippi, on a domestic violence charge. But by the end of his court appearance, Newsome would become the center of one of the most chaotic outbursts this courtroom had ever seen. The hearing was over. The ruling had been handed down. Newsome was being escorted out of the courtroom by a bailiff when, without warning, he snapped. Despite having his hands restrained, Newsome broke free from the bailiff's grip and launched into a violent rampage. He grabbed a stack of papers and hurled them directly at the judge, who sat frozen behind the bench, visibly stunned. Then he reached for a courtroom telephone and hurled it across the room. Security struggled to react in time. And in that moment, the judge made a shocking decision. Rather than waiting for deputies, he rose from the bench, stepped down into the chaos, and took Newsome down himself. Courtroom surveillance footage captured the scene as the judge pinned Newsome to a table, wrestling to subdue him as the courtroom watched in disbelief. Moments later, another man, identified as Newsome's brother, jumped in to assist. Together with security, they finally brought the defendant under control. But the damage had already been done. In addition to his original charge, Newsome was now facing contempt of court and a string of new felony charges. Outside the courtroom, Pike County Sheriff James Brumfield called it an unfortunate incident that never should have happened. He promised that new safety protocols had already been implemented to prevent something like this from ever happening again. Robert Accardo, president of the Pike County Board of Supervisors, also weighed in. He praised the judge's quick actions but made one thing clear: we never want to see violence like this inside a courtroom again. In the aftermath of the incident, the county increased courtroom security, bringing in more deputies, more constables, and tighter enforcement. A clear message had been sent. In Pike County, the bench isn't backing down, and violence in the courtroom will never be tolerated. This is Joseph Zealer, a man who evaded justice for over 2 decades after committing one of the most disturbing crimes in Florida's history. Back in May 1990, Zealer broke into a Cape Coral apartment where he attacked and took the lives of 11-year-old Robin Cornell and her 32-year-old babysitter, Lisa Story. That night, Robin's mother, Jan Cornell, had gone to stay at her boyfriend's home and left Lisa in charge. But when she returned the next morning, she walked into a nightmare. The front door was locked, the back sliding door slightly ajar, and upstairs, she found her daughter's lifeless body lying face down on the bathroom floor. It was a crime that shattered the community, and for 26 years, it remained unsolved. The case was even featured on America's Most Wanted in 2010, but still, no answers, no arrests, and no justice. That is, until September 2016, when a DNA match finally identified Joseph Zealer as the suspect. As the case went to trial, prosecutors revealed a chilling motive. Zealer allegedly held a personal grudge against Jan Cornell and took it out in the most devastating way imaginable. Given the brutal nature of the crime, the death penalty was viewed as the only fitting sentence. In May 2023, Zealer was found guilty of both killings. But the trial was far from ordinary. Even behind bars, Zealer showed no remorse, sending disturbing letters, making offensive gestures toward the courtroom camera, and acting so erratically during testimony that the judge removed the jury for their safety. And just before sentencing, he exploded again. Zealer tricked his attorney, Kevin Shirley, into leaning in for a side conversation, then suddenly struck him in the face. Bailiffs quickly responded, restraining Zealer and escorting him out of the courtroom. When he returned minutes later, still unshaken, he growled at the judge, revealing the words "world killer" etched into his teeth. Yet even then, he insisted, "I had nothing to do with this." His attorneys filed for a new trial, but Judge Robert Branning denied the motion. Within hours, Joseph Zealer was sentenced to death.
Therefore, the court concludes that under the laws of the state of Florida, the defendant has forfeited his right to live.
He now remains on death row, awaiting execution for a crime the public will never forget.